Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about absolute value equations. Okay, an example of that would look something like this. This is an absolute value equation because it has an absolute value in it and it has an equal sign. Okay, there's three main steps to solving an absolute value equation. The first step is to isolate the absolute value. What that means is anything that is outside of the absolute value, so in this example it would be the 4, you have to move that over to the other side first before you can do anything else. So the way that we're going to move the 4 is to add it. So you get the absolute value of 3x plus 1 equals 2. The second step is you want to make two equations. One equation, this number is going to be positive, and in the second equation, this number is going to be negative. So that would mean 3x plus 1 is equal to a positive 2, and 3x plus 1 is equal to a negative 2. The reason why we can do that is this inside here, if it is a positive 2, the absolute value of positive 2 equals 2. And if this number equals negative 2, the absolute value of negative 2 is also equal to a positive 2. So that's why we split it up into two separate equations. The last step, you probably guessed it, is you solve each equation. So by now you should be able to do this. Subtract 1, you get 3x equals 1. Divide by 3, you get x equals 1/3. For the second one, you subtract 1, you get 3x equals negative 3. Divide, you get x equals negative 1. Okay? That's our first example. Okay? Here is our second example. Okay, so in this example, we still want to do the same thing, isolate the absolute value. So here we have a negative 8 and we have a 2 that's outside of the absolute value. We need to move both of those before we're allowed to move on to step number 2. So because this fraction bar goes all the way across, we're going to move the 2 over. If the fraction bar stopped right here, then we would have to move the 8 over first. So multiply both sides by 2. That'll give you 12. And then we want to move the 8 over. That'll give us 20. Then we have it actually isolated. So this is the spot where you're allowed to actually break it up into the two separate equations. So I'm going to have negative 2x plus 5 equals a positive 20. I'm also going to have negative 2x plus 5 equals negative 20. And then you can go through and solve those. So you subtract 5 over, you get negative 2x equals 15. Then divide both sides by 2, you get x equals 15 over 2, but it's negative. Over here, same thing, subtract 5, you get negative 2x equals negative 25. Divide both sides by a negative 2. In this case, you get 25 over 2, but it's actually a positive number. So you actually have these two as your answers. Okay? The last thing that we're going to talk about today are the special cases. So here's two examples of some scenarios that you might see that look a little bit different. Okay? For this first one here, if I was to solve this, we isolate the absolute value, so I'm going to move the 4 over. When I do that, I would get the absolute value of x minus 3 equals 0. Well, you might be wondering, I need to make it a positive and I need to make it a negative. Well, we can't do that with 0, so you just have one equation. X minus 3 equals 0, so x equals 3. Okay, for the second one, when I move this 3 over, I'll get the absolute value of x plus 2 equals negative 2. Now you might be saying, well, I just make it one positive, make one negative. If I have the absolute value of something equal to a negative number, that can't really happen, because whatever I try to substitute in here, the absolute value is going to make that into a positive. So there is no way I can substitute in a number and make it into a negative. When this happens, it's going to be no solution. And that's one you have to be careful about. Most students are going to mess this up. They're going to actually put down x plus 2 equals negative 2, x plus 2 equals negative, or positive 2. So that's something you have to always be on the lookout for. Okay? There's one problem I want you guys to try on your own. Bring this in tomorrow, and we'll go over it at the beginning of class. So it looks like this. Okay? So bring this in tomorrow, we'll take a look at it, and then we'll go on from there. See you tomorrow.